pendant carries the mark of Cartier New York, and it was made around 1915, in the heart of the refined Belle Époque. The star of it is a magnificent sapphire hanging at the very bottom, a stone of roughly 10 carats. It appears to be a Ceylon sapphire, mined in what is now Sri Lanka, and those are prized for a lighter, more brilliant blue, rather than a dark, heavy color. A second sapphire of about 3 carats rests just above it in that same lovely shade, with small diamonds set around them as delicate accents. Both stones hang from an extremely fine platinum chain, so light that you can pick out the tiny wires worked into it by hand. That airy, lace-like quality was the signature of the era, when jewelers used the strength of platinum to make their settings almost disappear. Everything about it speaks of a moment when fine sapphires were plentiful, and Cartier stood at the very height. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sat down and typed this letter to a Unitarian minister who had traveled south to stand with the civil rights movement. He wrote it that October, just as the long, hard campaign in Albany, Georgia was drawing to a close. In it, what makes it so powerful is the moment it captures, a leader in the very thick of the movement, pausing to encourage one supporter by name. Typed letters like this, signed and full of King's own thoughts on the work ahead, are among the most sought-after of all civil rights documents. Prized for putting his voice and his cause to silver cups are the work of Josef Hoffmann, one of the founding figures of modern design. Born in 1870, Hoffmann trained as an architect and even won the prestigious Prix de Rome, yet he designed far more than buildings, turning his hand to furniture, glass, textiles, and silver. In 1903, he helped found the Wiener Werkstätte, a celebrated Vienna workshop where artists and craftsmen worked side by side to bring good design into everyday life. He created these cups for that workshop around 1910, at the very height of its output. Cartier, the celebrated Paris house founded in 1847, and it dates to the elegant Belle Époque around the 19-teens. It fairly drips with natural pearls, rose-cut diamonds, and rich blue enamel, all set in a delicate mix of platinum and gold. The back is covered in deep blue Guilloché enamel, a glassy finish fired over finely engraved metal, and worked into it are a set of initials picked out in diamonds, a special custom order. Inside, the movement was built by Cartier in partnership with the famous watchmaker Jaeger-LeCoultre, pairing beautiful looks with serious mechanical pedigree. Best of all, it still has its original fitted case, whose little double doors swing open to reveal the watch within, a charming flourish that Cartier, so that flowers, leaves, and vines appear trapped deep inside with a soft, three-dimensional glow. This piece, made in the Tiffany furnaces in Corona, Queens, carries winding vines against a lovely swirling blue. Achieving that depth took enormous skill, because the decorated surface had to be cased in crystal while still molten. So many fakes and imitations of Tiffany exist, and this poster captures that golden age perfectly. It was made in 1949 to sell tickets on Pan American Airways, back when the airline flew the Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, a double-decker plane so luxurious it had a cocktail lounge on the lower deck. The artwork comes from Boris Artzybashev, a Russian-American artist famous for his covers for Time and Fortune magazines. Here he paints Bermuda as a lush green island rising from a brilliant blue sea, with a mermaid emerging from the water to embrace it while holding the island's signature Easter lilies. Posters like this were the height of advertising art, designed to make a far-off place feel like paradise. This one was carefully framed long ago, and crucially its original white margins still survive, tucked safely beneath the mat. Most travel posters were thrown out once the season ended, which makes a bright, complete example like this a real survivor. Its graceful shape descends from an ancient bronze wine vessel made in China more than 1,000 years before Christ, so the form carries an astonishing depth of history. Cloisonné itself is painstaking work, in which thin metal wires are bent into patterns and the spaces between them filled with colored enamel, then fired and polished smooth. Jesuit visitors in the early 1700s. That single detail marks it as a piece from the imperial workshops of the Qianlong Emperor, made in the second half of the 18th century. Bowls of this quality were made for the most refined of households, and few survive in such. The side of this necklace is the side that no one else can see. Its maker, the great Hopi artist Charles Loloma, deliberately decorated the inner surface that rests against the wearer's skin, creating a hidden beauty meant for the owner alone. Loloma believed that color itself was a form of beauty, And this piece glows with coral, turquoise and ivory set in gold, including a band of rare and coveted Lander blue turquoise. Born in 1921, he grew into one of the most important and influential artists of the entire ring, made around 1980, and its name describes it perfectly. Dozens of round diamonds are massed tightly together and raised into a soft, rounded dome, so the whole top of the ring becomes one glittering mound of light. Its owner lovingly nicknamed it her cauliflower ring for exactly that bunched, blossoming shape. Bold, high, sparkling cluster rings like this were the height of fashion in the late 1970s and 80s, a time when more was very much more, and jewelry was made to be noticed across a crowded room. The diamonds are set in warm gold, which suits the era perfectly and lets the stones take center stage. A piece like this was never bought casually, but saved for and treasured over time, then worn with real pride. Even today, that domed cluster of diamonds carries all the confidence and glamour of the decade that produced it. A little burst of pure light on the named Grantland Rice watched four Notre Dame football players take a game apart and famously dubbed them the Four Horsemen. Borrowing the image straight from the Bible, the nickname stuck forever, turning Harry Stuhldreher, Jim Crowley, Don Miller and Elmer Layden into college football legends after they carried Notre Dame to the national championship and the Rose Bowl. They came to define an era when college football gripped the entire country. This program comes from a Notre Dame banquet held in 1933, and remarkably, all four men were present that evening and put their signatures on it. To find the autographs of all four horsemen together on a single piece tied to that golden age of the game is a genuine thrill for any collector. A piece like this carries not just four signatures, but the memory of one of the most romantic chapters in all of America. Joyce signed and dated it in Trieste, Italy in 1920. That city meant a great deal to him, since he had moved there from Ireland years earlier, taught English to make ends meet, and worked on this very novel while living there. The precise date and place actually help prove the signature is genuine, since a forger would rarely know exactly where a writer happened to be on a given day. This is one of the earliest editions of the book, and Joyce signed very few things, especially in 1920, when he was still poor and far from the towering literary figure he would become. A signed early Joyce is a rare prize, joining one of the 20th century's most important writers directly to one of his own landmark works. Of three genuine football legends, Bob Grease, Dan Marino, and Larry Sonka. Those three names are special because they are the only players in all of Dolphins history ever to have their jersey numbers retired. Grease and Sonka were the engine of the 1972 Dolphins, the one team in NFL history to finish an entire season without a single loss, then go on to win the Super Bowl and repeat the very next year. Sonka is remembered as one of the toughest running backs the game has ever seen, while Dan Marino became one of the most prolific passers of all time. What makes this ball so unusual is having all three together on a single piece, since Grease and Sonka were teammates, but Marino played in a later era entirely. Signed in bold marker and painted in the team's colors, it brings three eras of Dolphins greatness like this one. Sheldon Parsons was a celebrated portrait artist in New York, capturing famous faces that included the suffragist Susan B. Anthony and President McKinley. Then life changed everything. After his wife died and he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, Parsons moved out to Santa Fe in 1913, and the clear New Mexico light slowly transformed his work into glowing scenes of the land around him. He became a pillar of the Santa Fe art colony and the very first director of the New Mexico Museum of Art. This particular canvas is neither signed nor dated, which would normally be a puzzle, except that letters in Parsons's own hand still survive describing the very scene. In them, he notes that he painted it northwest of Santa Fe in October. The bowl is the work of Marguerite Wildenhain, a potter who broke real barriers in her field. She trained at the legendary Bauhaus Design School in Germany and became one of the very first women anywhere to earn the title of Master Potter. Forced to flee Europe as the Nazis rose to power, she left in 1940 for the United States and eventually settled at a place called Pond Farm, tucked into the hills of Northern California. There she taught generations of students and threw pots like this one. Wildenhain believed deeply in the dignity of handmade craft, that a useful object thrown by hand could be quietly beautiful, and that conviction shows here in the vessel's even, balanced form. She shaped every piece herself, rather than leaving the work to others, so each one carries her own personal touch. This is regarded as one of the finest examples of pond farm pottery anyone is likely to come across. Prison. Born in South Carolina in 1911, she endured a brutally hard life, orphaned young and married as a child before moving north during the Great Migration. After defending herself against a man who had been abusing her, she was sent to prison, and it was there that she first began to draw, quietly sketching the women around her. By the time she was released in 1973, she had discovered a real and lasting gift. This drawing, made in 1976 in colored pencil and ink, shows her unmistakable style, with a bold face, wide expressive eyes, and the kind of patterned clothing she herself wore. Today she is celebrated as one of America's important self-taught artists, though like so many, the recognition mostly arrived after her death in 1990. Her work carries a directness and quiet strength that can Monhegan, a tiny island some 12 miles off the coast of Maine that you can still reach only by boat. Since the 1890s, it has drawn great American artists, with painters like Edward Hopper and George Bellows all setting up their easels there.